Welcome to the Supply Geek podcast, the show that turns shipping containers and glossy corporate advertising into real stories worth sharing. I'm your host, Ben Thornton-Jones, and whether you're a supply chain geek like me, a conscious consumer, or just someone who's always wondered how the vanilla ends up in your ice cream, you are in the right place. Each episode, we unpack the hidden stories behind the stuff we use and the things we do every day, from palm oil plantations to the milk supply chain, from cargo ships to carbon emissions. We're not just about moving goods, we're here to move minds. So grab your map of the world, adjust your safety vest of skepticism, and let's dive into the weird and wonderful world of supply chains. Let's get geeky. So my guest today, and number one vanilla geek, is Hamish Taylor. Hamish, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This is obviously a new podcast series, so I leaned very heavily on my network and people that I've worked with, and there was no one else I could think of that would do more justice to vanilla than yourself. So thank you so much for being here. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and why do you know more than most people about vanilla?
Well, I guess the first thing to say is these days you're catching me on my farm at home in Scotland, hence looking at like a farmer. And I've got to say that for me, the key thing on vanilla, and the reason that I know as much as I do, and to be honest with you, I don't know that much at all in real terms, is simply I've got the curiosity of a 5-year-old. And whenever you go exploring the world of vanilla, you're learning things and you're asking questions, you're meeting new people. And from every person you're meeting, you're learning something new. And it could be why is it a consumer loves vanilla? What is their first memory when they were a child? What is it about mom's apple pie if you're in the United States? Or their favorite memory of going to the seaside with their grandpa and having an ice cream cone? So whether you're meeting consumers or farmers or suppliers, whether you're actually dealing with former competitors, current competitors, or just people who care about vanilla, you're going to find out something new. And it's really, I mean, it's like all supply chains. If you believe you've got the answer already, you never go exploring. Whereas if you actually just go with an explorer's mentality, and you go into your supply chain with open eyes, open ears, and indeed an open mind, then you're going to find out more and more as you go. And in the world of vanilla, it's such a complex beast that you never master it. I mean, I always say to my clients when I'm working on vanilla, I'm not a vanilla master, I'm a vanilla student. Because we've all got so much to learn about vanilla that we'll never ever be able to say we're a master of vanilla. So in that sense, I am a geek because a geek doesn't necessarily mean that you're an expert. It means that you've got a slightly nerdy interest in the subject that you're looking after. And indeed, I remember one of my customers in Unilever turn around and say, "You're such a sustainability nerd." And I wear that badge with pride, right? I wear the badge with pride because I got into sustainability quite late. I got into vanilla, I'd say, 38 years ago when I joined the perfumery business by accident rather than by design. And once you start learning about perfumery and the greats, be they Guerlain Shalimar or Chanel No. 5, or even Obsession by Calvin Klein, a more modern vanilla, or you're looking at Le Male by Jean-Paul Gaultier, and you're looking at the smashing together of lavender and vanilla, vanilla's everywhere. And so I first got involved with vanilla from the fragrance side of my career. And honestly speaking, I only got into perfumery because some clever guy in Unilever said to me at the graduate interview stage, if you go and do what you applied to do, you'll be bored silly in 6 months. So don't. Come and join us in the world of perfumery. And the world of perfumery, after 20 years, led to the world of flavors. And the world of flavors led me into this indulgent journey into Madagascar, Uganda, tapping into Indonesia, tapping into what comes from Papua New Guinea, the different varieties of vanilla. And all of it comes back down to how do you take this thing called vanilla, and I'll leave it as a thing for the moment, because I'm sure you're going to ask me,
Hmm.
what is it? This thing
Yeah.
called vanilla, why does it delight people? Why do people
Mm.
fall in love with it? What is it about vanilla that can be sensuality within a fine fragrance and at the same time be complete and utter innocence in a vanilla ice cream cone that you're giving to a 2-year-old? And it's that mix of sensuality, great sensorial taste, the simple delight of vanilla is something that I think no other ingredient really has. And I know you'll be doing other
Mm.
ingredients in your series, but honestly speaking, Ben, you're starting with the best one.
I'm very conscious you're severely biased, but at the same time, thank you for explaining all that. I mean, if I'm a complete supply geek myself, so I wear that badge with honor also. But I'm even more excited than I was before in finding out about this supply chain. So let's start. And let me be also from my side. I was thinking about this. How do I kick off? And I thought, well, how do I think about it? Which I think is maybe how a lot of other people think about it before we get into some of the detail. I think when most people think about vanilla, and you touched on some of these points, you know, I think about ice cream. Maybe I think about cakes. I think about, I'm quite into my cooking. I watch cooking shows where you kind of see the chefs scoring down a vanilla pod, scraping out the seeds to put in some sort of custard or sauce or something like that. And then I was also thinking, I think the word vanilla also seems to carry a bit of a derogatory term to describe something as kind of boring or plain. So that's probably where a lot of people's scope is, and when they think about vanilla. But I guess let's take a step back and start from the very beginning. So maybe you can just tell us what vanilla is and where
Sure.
the journey starts for it.
So the vanilla that we know is the fruit pod of an orchid that originated in Mexico. And it was moved from Mexico to Comoros, to Reunion, to Madagascar almost 200 years ago. And the thing was that in Mexico, the vanilla pod, vanilla planifolia, is the main variant. You've also got vanilla tahientis and vanilla pompona as well. But vanilla planifolia is the real one that we talk about. And that was growing in Mexico. It was discovered to work very well with a other ingredient that we know and love that comes from Mexico, cacao and cocoa and chocolate.
Hmm.
So the
Hmm.
vanilla tonality worked very, very well with the slight bitterness that you get in raw cacao and raw chocolate. So putting them together became a natural delight in terms of what was happening there. And at that time, you were looking at the Europeans in particular who were absorbing everything they could that tasted amazing from the rest of the world, bringing in these treasures to France and Germany and UK as explorers brought them back. And they decided, we like this stuff. And it moved to Comoros and Reunion and Madagascar, the islands that collectively are called the Bourbon Islands for vanilla. And there
Hmm.
was a slave. And one of the things we need to check up on is Albus is his first name. I forget what his second name is, but Albus was the slave who actually identified how to manually pollinate the vanilla flower. And the orchid that it is, it's very fragile. It flowers for one day. The flower will blossom in the morning, and by the next day, that flower is dying and drooping and falling off. So there'll be
Oh,
another
you mean it?
flower in the
It only
same
flowers
vine.
one day in total.
Yes, one flower. One flower will blossom and
Right.
emerge for just one day. Now, that same vanilla
Wow.
vine will produce many vanilla flowers in the season. But if you don't pollinate it on the first day it flowers, that's it. No vanilla pod. And
Wow.
pollination takes place with a sharp-pointed stick in which you bring together the male and the female parts of the vanilla flower. You squeeze gently, not too hard, squeeze gently, and it's done. And then that, a few days later, that will start to turn into the formation of a vanilla pod. Now, when you say, oh, only one flower per day, yeah, that can be pollinated. Yep, but the farmers in Madagascar and Uganda, where vanilla is being grown, where they're pollinating these flowers, can pollinate as many as 3.5 or 4,000 flowers from dawn until just after lunch when it becomes too hot. And you're going to leave
Hmm.
those flowers and you'll come back the next day to actually pollinate the new flowers. So that's 3,500 flowers pollinated in, let's say, 6 hours in the morning. Think about the speed of that. That is
Yeah,
amazing. They're going from flower to
that is
flower,
incredible.
pollinating, and 3,500 of them.
Wow.
Now,
And
from the
incredibly
point,
labor
yep,
intensive, right?
very labor intensive. And this is where we've got to realize that, I mean, I've got here vanilla, a pen made from a vanilla bean. And when you realize that without the hand pollination, without the effort of people far away from us in the United Kingdom or in America or in Germany and Europe, where most of vanilla is actually consumed, if it wasn't for those people hand pollinating every flower, we would not have vanilla. In Mexico, there's a bee, the Melipona bee, but it's actually very inefficient at pollinating. And so even in Mexico today, vanilla is hand pollinated, even though it's the only country in the world that's actually got the bee that can actually do the pollination there because it has a long proboscis and it can get in and it can slit the flower and then bring the male and female parts of flower together. Now you say, oh, okay, great. So that's how a vanilla pod is born. The hand pollination is the moment of its creation. But it takes 9 months until it's actually fully mature and ready to harvest. So it's like human pregnancy. From the moment of conception, of hand pollinating that flower, into the moment that it is really ready to be picked, is fully 9 months. Now that means
Wow.
that not only do you need the precision to begin with, you need patience. And if you want to have good tasting vanilla, you have to wait until the point that it's fully mature. And at that point, you can harvest the bean. And then the process of transformation kicks in. So just as we talk about, okay, it's an orchid, right? So how long does the orchid take to grow? It takes 3 years before it starts to produce its first flowers. Okay. And where does the orchid grow? It grows in a forest environment. It needs a tutor tree for the vine to grow up, and it needs a shade tree to provide it some cover. And if it doesn't have the shade, it doesn't grow well and it doesn't grow strong. But then you have to remove the shade to create sun stress on the vine for it to flower. Because that's a signal to the plant that says, hey, you need to survive. You need to produce new vanilla seeds. And to do that, you must flower. And so you need stress by removing some of the shade to actually provide this impetus to the plant to produce vanilla flowers that we can then hand pollinate to then turn into vanilla pods. And then, as I said before, patience kicks in. So you've got to wait for 9 months until it's ready. Now, some people then say, oh, well, does that just mean that the farmer goes away and forgets about it? No, because you've got to keep the plot clean. You've got to make sure that there's no garbage from the tree leaves or anything that are getting in the way that could start to cause the right environment for disease, something called fusarium, a mold fungus to spread. And you've got to keep the vine in good condition. the farmer will actually tend their vines every day. And worse than that, as it gets into, say, 6 months, 7 months old, then the vanilla vines, the vanilla pods, become vulnerable to theft. Because people can come along in the middle
Yeah.
of the night and
Hmm.
steal your vanilla beans. Now, they're not ready for harvesting yet, but somebody might be willing to buy the immature beans from them at a cheap price, and they'll go and steal them from their neighbor.
No.
Now, you
After all
laugh
that
at
hard
me
work.
after all that hard work. Now, you laugh at me because coming from Scotland and, the one field over from our farm is full of sheep. And in Scotland, you hear about sheep rustling and sheep being stolen and by people turning up in 4x4s in the middle of the night. Rather naively, when I first heard about vanilla theft, I had the image of people turning up in 4x4s and going out, picking all the vanilla beans and then running away. Well, they don't drive off. Unfortunately, what's happening often is it's the youth within the village, within the community, within the area who are stealing the vanilla beans from their neighbors and sometimes even from their own families in order to get some spending money. And so this is where, when you look at what defines and what makes vanilla sustainable, you have to put in a lot of effort to make sure that
Mm.
you're supporting the farmer to try and prevent vanilla theft and to try and encourage the patients to wait until the vanilla beans are fully mature before you then actually harvest them.
Yeah.
So the farmer also needs to benefit from having other sources of income whilst he's waiting 9 months. Because imagine if you and I went out to work and then we come back and we say to our families, I tell you what, it was great at work today and I'm going back to work tomorrow and the next week and next month I'll be in work and we'll get paid in 9 months' time. So they need other crops. And this is the bit
Mm.
where people get too myopic in their focus on vanilla, in the belief that, oh, it's the second most expensive spice in the world. Not at the moment, by the way. We'll come on to that later. But people think that vanilla can guarantee farmers a good income. No. Like farming done properly anywhere in the world, farmers need a diversified income stream. They need income coming at different times of the year. You know
Hmm.
this as well as I do. When you're going to be doing your mint, you know that mint farmers are wheat farmers, they're rice farmers, they're mustard farmers. In Madagascar, the vanilla farmers tend to be rice farmers. But they've also got cattle, they've got zebu, they've got chickens, they've got pigs. They're actually harvesting bananas. They might be harvesting some coffee. They might be growing some ginger. In Uganda, many of the farmers will be growing bananas. They'll be growing coffee. They'll be growing jackfruit. They'll be growing pineapple. And what they're looking to do, and where good sustainable supply chain people come in, is that they try and maximize the alternative revenue streams for farmers, but also
Yeah.
make sure that subsistence farming, so rice, in in Madagascar, rice is the staple diet for vanilla farmers. They're
Hmm.
eating per capita, on average, 140 kilos of rice per year. So let's say 400 grams of rice per day per person. That's a lot of rice. I don't even want to
That
think
is a
about
lot
how
of
many
rice.
grains of rice it is. But you can imagine if the farmer is not efficient at growing their own rice, if they don't have good productivity and yield, or they end up with too many weeds in the field, then they're not going to be putting enough rice on the table for their family.
Yeah.
So in my career of building and helping run sustainable supply chains of vanilla, I'd start learning about rice farming. And the very fact that if you plant rice in straight rows, you get better productivity and yield.
Mm.
Not because, not because the rice grows better that way, but because it's easier to see where the weeds are and then pull the weeds out. And those weeds are competing for nutrients. So if you can make weeding easier, you make rice growing easier, you get better productivity and yield. And if you do that, and the farmer's also doing vanilla growing, then he's more likely to have a stable income for him and his family, or
Yeah.
her and her family. Because a lot of the farmers we deal with in vanilla are women head of household families. And that's particularly true in Uganda as well. So the whole thing is a complex beast. And this is where I get a lot of teasing from some of my former colleagues in one of my clients because I devised a vanilla strategy for them. And being in marketing, of course, we had to come up with a catchy little name for it. So you called it Simply Vanilla. And I've got to be honest with you, that it's probably the biggest marketing misbrand of my life because
It sounds like it.
there's nothing simple about the cultivation, the curing, the management of vanilla. It's one of the
Mm.
most complex things. And that's where you said the point earlier about we think about vanilla and we think something is plain, it's dull, it's boring. Well, if you want a dull, boring life, never, ever, ever get involved in the vanilla business.
I think that's something that everybody can take away from this conversation. It is so fascinating. A few points to pick up on as
Sure,
you were talking
sure,
through there. I think it's, well, first of all, fascinating to understand where vanilla comes from. If I can recap a second,
sure,
just to
please
sort
do.
of play back what I've heard. Um, I mean, first of all, people sitting there with their map of the world. So we talked a lot about Madagascar. I think you mentioned a few other countries where it is, but I
Yep,
think my understanding is it's largely Madagascar, and you kind of see this on advertising as well.
yes,
Madagascan vanilla and things like this. And Madagascar, if my geography serves me correct, large island off the east coast of Africa. Um, and I think the thing that really hit home when you were describing that there was, if take away the fact that I would need a huge skill set uplift to be able to start farming vanilla, but you're saying 3 years from now will be the first time after planting that I would actually potentially, if I've done things right, get some flowers. But then I'd have to be patient and wait a further 9 months after that if I've hand pollinated them correctly, which sounds very labor intensive, before you then get the pods coming to full maturity and at the point where you can pick them and move on to the next stage. Before we move on to that next stage, because I'm
yeah.
really fascinated to see how a pod turns into all the different things and the different connotations and ends up in ice creams and foods and things that we can talk about. I want to come back to your point around the farmers. It would be great to understand some key stats that you might be able to share on. I'm interested to know, how much vanilla is produced every single year.
Yep.
What is the scale that we're talking about? Things like how many farmers are involved in that cultivation, in terms of numbers. Um, and then perhaps we can touch on the points around which are the largest producing countries in the world as well for vanilla.
So this is the bit where you can reach for your Excel spreadsheets and you can find a whole array of different numbers. But some of the key things. It's between say 4,500 and 5,000 tons a year of black vanilla, cured vanilla beans that
And
are
you have one
produced
there.
around the world.
Hmm.
And you can see a little bit of it there. Now, that varies from one year to the next. Madagascar typically produces between 3,000 and 3,500 tons a year. And
Okay.
many people would say that Madagascar, when it comes to vanilla planifolia, accounts for between 75 and 80% of the total world production.
Okay.
Countries like Uganda and Indonesia are battling for second place, and
Hmm.
they are coming in the sort of 500 to 600 tons now. But give you an indication, somewhere like Uganda used to produce well over 600 tons, and then it collapsed to less than 100 tons, and now is gradually coming back to a stable number in that 500 to 600 tons range. When you look at Indonesia, a lot of the vanilla from Indonesia is also grown in neighboring Papua New Guinea. And sometimes it can be difficult to determine whether your vanilla is Indonesian or is it coming from PNG. When you look at the other countries, Comoros and Reunion, the islands just off of Madagascar, which together those three islands form the Bourbon origin contrôlée, if you like, in terms of the only countries that can produce vanilla that's called vanilla Bourbon are Madagascar, Comoros, and Reunion. Comoros and Reunion together produced less than 100 tons. Mexico, the original home of vanilla, now its commercial production is probably only between 60 and 80 tons a year. So you can see that the market is so heavily driven by Madagascar. Now, people say, why? Why is Madagascar so important? Well, all of these countries have got something in common, which is they are quite warm, they've got quite decent humidity, and typically they have decent elevation as well. So vanilla grows best at a slight elevation, say 300 meters above sea level. It can grow right next to the sea, but the best vanilla tends to come from higher areas up to 600 or 700 meters above sea level. And
Okay.
the real common denominator as to why vanilla grows where it does today is labor cost and land cost. So when you look at it, it is, unfortunately, it's associated with typically poor countries or developing countries where, and is often grown on land on very steep hillsides, for instance, that isn't really suitable for other arable crops because it's it's like that. I mean, I can well remember the first time I was taken to Madagascar. I almost thought I was going to need oxygen by the time we eventually arrived at the farmer's
That
field.
mountaineering.
It was mountaineering and it was slippery and it was muddy and it was covered in bushes with really sharp spikes on them to the side.
Yeah.
And one particularly irritating bush that I remember very well on my way back down, I grabbed hold of it to stop myself sliding down the mountain. And of course, people, I exaggerate, it's a hillside, but it felt like Everest for me at that point. And I grabbed hold of it, and suddenly I found that my whole hand was embedded with needles and tiny little
No.
needles that I was then shown how to use a knife to scrape them out of my skin, which took about the next 3 hours. So,
Oh.
you know, the thing is that vanilla grows where land is cheap and labor is cheap. And that's why if you want to do vanilla sustainably, you've got to take the responsibility for land use and land rights, and you've got to take the responsibility for human rights and giving the farmers a chance to earn a decent income. Because done
Yeah.
properly, vanilla can make a significant contribution to farmers' incomes.
Such a
Um,
common scenario, I think, compared to a lot of,
it is.
I'm sure the different crops, the different materials that we're going to talk about in this series, but we hear it time and time again. And I think it's really synonymous with once you get into agricultural supply chains, particularly, it's these types of areas in the world and sort of poorer countries and locations that generally you find these things. Hamish, talking about the farmers, when
Mhm.
we're talking about farmers here, are we talking about a smallholder? This is a plot of their own land, or are these large plantations, or a mix of both? How does it work?
So the vast majority of vanilla comes from smallholder farmers. People have
Hmm.
experimented with plantations. They've often had problems in terms of planting density, then giving rise to diseases, and plantation failures can take place. And or you don't have the same engagement with your agricultural workers if they're working in a plantation versus if they're working on their own farm. And I think one of the things there that's worth saying is you can almost instantly tell the difference between a good vanilla farmer and an average vanilla farmer. And that's
Mm-hmm.
by when you go and visit their farm, which is no more than 1.5 hectares. So they're really quite small farms. And
Mm-hmm.
remember, they're growing agroforestry style. So there's lots of other things growing on their vanilla farms. This is Madagascar. I'll talk in a little minute about Uganda. But you can tell a good vanilla farmer because they keep on touching the vines. They're feeling whether the plant is healthy. They're feeling the moisture content within the leaves. They're looking at the thickness of the vine as to whether that's growing well. They're checking the vine for stress. And you can instantly tell a good farmer by standing next to them when they're talking to you and answering the questions. They are touching their vanilla vine the whole conversation. They're not consciously doing it. It's not being done to show the visiting foreigner how much care they take. You can just see
Mm-hmm.
them because as you follow them, as you walk around their plot, looking at the different vanilla vines, and they grow about maybe 2 meters apart, is a really healthy spacing for them. As you're
Right.
walking around from one vine to the next, the farmer that you're following is touching every vine as they go. And it took me many visits before I actually realized that. But it was when I went to Tanzania to look at vanilla farming there. And was taken to 3 different farms. One was beautiful, huge vanilla pods hanging there, healthy vines. Oh, and healthy coffee bushes. Oh, and healthy cacao trees. And
Mm.
everywhere where we went on that farmer's farm, he's touching the vine. The next farm we went to was a little bit more of a stressed out farmer, experiencing some problems with drought, and the vines weren't in
Mm-hmm.
such good condition. And the third farmer was actually a farmer who shouldn't be in the vanilla business at all. His soil was wrong. The structure of his farm was wrong. He didn't have enough shade trees. There wasn't a proper, authentic agroforestry. And he wasn't proud of his vines, and they weren't growing well. And you could almost, I said to the process afterwards, I said, you could see brilliant vanilla farming, average vanilla
Mm-hmm.
farming, and someone who shouldn't be in vanilla farming at all. Now,
Yeah.
one of the toughest things that we have to do if we really want to look at ethical, responsible sourcing is we have to be candid with farmers because they're not massive plantations. They are smallholder farmers, and their whole livelihood is built around their small farm. If that farm is not working to maximum efficiency, growing rice in one part, producing fruit in another, bananas in a third part, maybe a little bit of coffee to sell in the local market, if they're not all working well together, that farmer is going to struggle when the vanilla market price collapses as it has done recently. Now, there's a
Mm-hmm.
big difference as well from country to country. So in Tanzania, they're still learning how to do vanilla farming. To a large extent, in certain places in Indonesia, they're still learning how to do vanilla farming.
Yeah.
In in Madagascar, most vanilla farmers have forgotten more than you and I will ever know about vanilla. They're not learning how to do it. It's part of their heritage.
Mm.
And we need to respect that heritage. And we need to encourage the next generation of farmers to get into vanilla, but to do it well. I was struck by when I went to Uganda. In Uganda, farmers live on their farm. They don't actually call them farms, they call them gardens. And it reminded me of what I met in Calabria in the south of Italy when I went to see the bergamot farmers. And they talked about their gardens. And it's not a farm, it's a garden. And when you're in Uganda, you're 2 minutes walk. And that's a very slow walk when you're still in your half asleep in the morning from your bed to your farm. Whereas in Madagascar, the farmer may be walking 1 hour, 1.5 hours to and from their home in the village to the vanilla farm on the hillside.
Right.
And that creates a new vulnerability in Madagascar that doesn't exist in
Mm.
Uganda. And in Uganda, in that garden, you've got the banana, the jackfruit, the tomatoes. You've got the coffee. In certain areas of Uganda, you'll have the cocoa as well. And
Yeah.
every smallholder farmer typically has chickens because the chickens feed off the bugs and the grubs in the ground. They do a good job of cleaning things up, and they grow quickly, and they provide food for the family. And if there's excess chickens, you can sell them on the market. So in Uganda, people are living on their farms. And that proximity means that life is actually quite a lot easier because they don't have 3 hours walking every day, which is effectively unproductive time.
Mm-hmm.
They've got 2 minutes and 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And the other big difference between Uganda and Madagascar is that Uganda has 2 vanilla seasons a year because it has 2 rainy seasons. And the 2 rainy seasons produce 2 flowering seasons. So in Uganda, the farmer will typically be harvesting vanilla in June, July, and in December, January. And that relates to the respective flowering seasons 9 months before. And this always struck me as being interesting because everyone said, oh, Uganda has much higher vanillin content than you would get within. And vanillin is one of the key components of vanilla in terms of its
Mm.
flavor profile. There are 200 different components in a vanilla extract. Some would say there's 400. There's 200 are giving real taste differences to it. But vanillin is the most important one. In Uganda, you can have vanilla beans that regularly get vanillin levels above 4% once they're fully cured. In Madagascar, you'll get at best 2.2, 2.3, maybe 2.4% for gourmet grade.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference comes from the fact that there's two harvests, because on the same vine will produce flowers in two different periods. So when it comes to harvesting, then the main vanilla that the farmer should be harvesting is 9 months old. But on the same vine, there will be 3-month-old vanilla beans. Now, in Madagascar, where it's one vanilla season, one vanilla market a year, if
Mm-hmm.
there's been a range of flowering time, you've got a range of maturity of the beans. But because you've only got one vanilla market day, the farmer goes and harvests everything, immature beans and fully mature beans.
Okay.
In Uganda, the farmer looks at the vine and goes, this one's mature, I will harvest. This one's immature, I will leave. And effectively, in their heads, what they're doing is saying, money today, money tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And nowhere in the world that you go in, any of the supply chains you'll be investigating, nowhere should anyone from the Western world assume that a farmer is stupid. They're not. They're very smart people. So when you see when a farmer is given the choice that says, money today and money tomorrow, I'll do both, then what happens in Uganda is you only pick mature beans, which means that you've got more of the precursor to vanillin, a chemical called glucovanillin that occurs naturally. You've got more glucovanillin in the beans, which means that when you do the transformation, the curing process properly, you get more vanillin in the beans.
Okay.
And I liken it to the orange industry, because orange trees, the difference between apples and oranges, and I just made my cider just at the weekend. But when
Mm-hmm.
you're harvesting apples, you shake the tree
Mm-hmm.
and you collect the apples that fall off. When you're harvesting oranges, you carefully hand pick every single orange,
Mm-hmm.
because on the same orange tree, you've got mature oranges,
Yeah.
immature oranges, and orange flowers. On the vines in Uganda, you've got mature vanilla beans, immature vanilla beans, and sometimes you've even got flowers on the vine at the same time.
Wow. So you've got to be super careful with picking exactly what you need
Bingo,
at the very right time.
bingo. And if you
Wow.
and if you're super careful about it,
Mm,
and then you apply some real science into the way that you actually cure the green vanilla beans into black vanilla beans. And curing is a process for your audience whereby the glucovanillin is turned into vanillin and other components. The beans go from green, looking like haricot vert, to looking like the
mm.
black vanilla beans that we've got here. And
Yeah, that we know.
when they do that, you're actually making vanillin, but you're also losing vanillin at the same time. So
Hmm.
the process of curing, when you do traditional sun curing, means that you blanch the beans, you put them into water that's about 75 degrees, you leave them in there for 7 or 8 minutes, you then take them out. That has killed the cells, killed the beans themselves, opened up the pores of the cell membranes to release the glucovanillin and bring it in contact with the enzyme that will do the transformation work. You then
Hmm.
put them into wooden boxes where they sweat, and you keep them warm for a number of days. And during that period, you then take them out into the sun to allow some of the water to evaporate off. And the UV from the sun also encourages this maturation fermentation process. And without the UV, you don't get particular flavor components that we love in the end vanilla. So in Madagascar or in wherever you're doing traditional sun curing of beans, the beans are going out of the box, into the
Hmm.
sun, spread out on ground sheets, allowed to get so much sun. Monsieur Météo, the weatherman, says it's going to rain. There's this frantic dash. Everyone rolls up the blankets with the vanilla beans back into the
Yeah.
wooden boxes, keep them warm. And then that goes on for a number of days before you then start to properly dry the vanilla beans in the sun. And you're starting with moisture levels in the green bean that are 85, 90%. And
Hmm.
when you're coming down to gourmet quality, gourmet grade vanilla bean, you're looking at a moisture level of 24%,
Right.
right? And you can even dry it further. But that drying process, so the curing process produces vanillin, the drying process can destroy it. So if you don't get it right, then you're going to end up with poor quality beans.
My goodness. Hamish, I am never gonna eat anything that's got vanilla in the same way again. I have this newfound appreciation for how hard it is and what it's gone through just to get some vanilla into the product that I'm
Now,
consuming.
remember,
It's
it's not just
just incredible. That's true, and that's what I wanted to move on to. Actually, we'll maybe come back to the farm in a second, but I think it would be interesting to understand the to call it products that vanilla appears in. I think we've kind of got the classics that we've talked about:
yeah.
vanilla ice cream, baked goods, things like this. But I think it'd be really interesting to hear from your side some interesting products that people might not realize is a huge consumer of vanilla.
Well, one of the closely related to ice cream, obviously, is yogurt. And
Hmm.
many yogurts are flavored with vanilla. And you get particularly nice French brands that you can see the vanilla specks in them as well. And you've got a
Yeah.
nice picture of the vanilla bean with the vanilla flower on the pot. And then you know that you're getting real vanilla extract inside your yogurt. Now,
Hmm.
it works very well in yogurt and ice cream because the vanilla flavor works well with those dairy fats that are
Hmm.
there. So they smooth out and cover that fatty base note that you can get from milk and milk products. And then you get this nice sweetness on top. That's
Mhm.
also why it works inside chocolate. So
Yeah.
when we said at the beginning, it was originally in Mexico and coming together with cacao, in vanilla and chocolate makes it nice and smooth and takes away some of the bitterness.
Mhm.
And baked goods, as you mentioned as well, we all love a pastry in the morning, and the Danish pastries or the French patisserie and so on. Um, Mom's apple pie in America is a staple, and everyone associates
Yeah.
it with vanilla. But
Yeah.
sometimes we forget that Coca-Cola, um, that we all take for granted in its secret formula. A large part of the secret formula of Coca-Cola and all cola beverages is vanilla and vanilla
So not even just a
extract.
vanilla cola, the
Nope,
standard
nope,
recipe
standard,
for Coca-Cola.
standard.
Wow. Okay.
Now you've got vanilla, you've got cinnamon, you've got lime, you've got other spices within it, but you've got a large part of the cola flavor is coming from vanilla.
Wow.
And
Okay.
then when you look at that, of course, we will all hear about vanilla lattes. If we are
Mhm.
Starbucks, Costa, whoever, we're getting it coming
Mhm.
into coffees. And
Yeah.
then the other one that we tend to forget as well, and this was one of the first products I ever came into association with in my flavor days. I was in Bromborough in the Wirral in the north west of England, and I was
Mhm.
working on Bailey's. And Bailey's Irish Cream owes a lot of its distinctive flavor to vanilla beans.
Vanilla.
And
Wow. That I did not know.
I just saw a good friend of mine who actually used to do a lot of work for the vanilla ice cream inside Unilever. She now works for Diageo, and they've just launched Bailey's chocolate orange flavor, and with Terry's chocolate orange. So you've got
Yeah.
Bailey's with its vanilla, and you've got Terry's
Mhm.
chocolate orange, and then this is why your podcast audience needs to listen to the Supply Chain Geeks, because we're bringing together the best of vanilla, the best of milk and dairy, and the best of coffee, and the best of now Terry's chocolate orange. So
Wow.
when you
I'll look out
start
for that
to
one.
play with vanilla, you can play with it in so many different ways. And that's on the
Mm.
flavor and food and beverage side of the business. On the
Yes.
fragrances side, you've got to be careful with vanilla because this brown color that we associate so well with natural vanilla and natural vanilla extract that we buy in the supermarket shelves, that can turn your beautiful white lotion or your white cream, your skincare cream, dark brown within days.
Yeesh.
So,
Which nobody wants.
which nobody wants, which means a lot of personal care products that use vanilla actually use vanilla analogs, synthetic chemicals that don't come from vanilla itself, because the
Okay.
process of decolorizing vanilla to use, say, within a fine fragrance, then what you've got to do is something called supercritical extraction methods using CO2. Now, that will give you a decolorized extract that you can use for beautiful vanilla smell, but it's super expensive.
Okay.
So you've got to, if it's natural, it's super expensive. So
Mhm.
when you see vanilla on a household air freshener, or you see it on a candle, or you see it on a personal product, look carefully and you'll probably find it's not natural vanilla that's inside. It could
Okay.
be vanillin or ethyl vanillin or a whole number of compounds that have been made to mimic the vanilla
Mhm.
smell that we like. And I think that whenever you look at all these products, and we're mentioning many of them, you know, even Coca-Cola is comforting and reassuring. We think of the Coca-Cola Santa Claus truck in the adverts in the red. We think of teaching the world to sing. There's a certain comfort about it. When we think about mom's apple pie or grandma's house, and we think about vanilla, there's comfort. When we use it in fine fragrances or in a fabric conditioner, then we can use vanillic notes because it feels comfortable. It's warm.
Mm.
When you smell vanilla, hmm, stress levels go down. Now, people try and say scientifically they've gone down. But I've never really seen someone eating an ice cream that's stressed unless they've got a young child with them who's crying their eyes out.
Well, that's an external factor that you can't manage, but yeah, I totally agree with you. It's so true now that you think about vanilla and all the different forms that you have it in terms of it is comfort, it is de-stress, it's indulgent, I would say as well. I think that's something that it definitely is. And yeah, it's a far cry from that statement that I made near the start talking about it being that derogatory claim of being something plain or something boring. It's far from it with this conversation. Hamish, this has been fascinating. I'm conscious of not missing before we finish talking. Let's go back to the farm. Let's go back to making vanilla. What are the key challenges that
Okay.
farmers are feeling, but externally we also the challenges that you see
Okay.
within vanilla farming as well, because I think that would be really interesting for people to understand. And then let's talk about what is the sustainable and resilient future possibilities so that we can maintain this fantastic crop.
So, anyone who knows me in the world of vanilla will have heard this story before, but they would never forgive me if I didn't tell the story. And this was my very first visit to Madagascar, on my vanilla journey, meeting farmers, experiencing the rainforest, looking at what was happening, looking at how we could set up a sustainable sourcing program that would address some of the known challenges. And some of those challenges, so there's no, nothing hidden here, total transparency, deforestation, and people chopping down the forests to clear land, normally for
Mm-hmm.
banana or rice production, but then eventually they might plant vanilla on it. So vanilla gets associated with deforestation, sometimes unfairly, but it's associated. So
Yeah.
if you are growing vanilla in an area that has got deforestation, you have to take a landscape level approach to see how you do things. Vanilla has
Mm-hmm.
also been associated with child labor, with people saying that children are working in the fields. Um, there's quite a degree of nonsense have got to be said about little hands pollinating the flowers. Those flowers are so precious to the farmer that they don't allow their kids to actually go and pollinate the vanilla beans. It's a skilled job to do it quickly, accurately, and without causing damage. But child labor was associated with vanilla, and it's associated with vanilla because of poverty and because of lack of access to decent quality education. So
Yeah.
if you tackle the root causes of child labor, which are poverty and access to decent education, then you can help eliminate it and not just displace it from your supply chain into something else. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'd been to see the farmers, I'd been to discover, I'd been to explore, I'd been to bring my skepticism. You talked about at the beginning, you have to bring skepticism to a supply chain to really understand what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
I then went back to Antananarivo, the capital of Madagascar, that for obvious reasons everyone just calls Tana. I went back
Mm-hmm.
to Tana and I was told that it was a group of fair trade farmers wanted to meet with Mr. Hamish. Okay. And I was there, I was trying to set up the Sustainable Vanilla Initiative at the time. And I met with the farmers and we talked about the difference between good and bad vanilla. And I said, the real problem is that a consumer can't tell by tasting whether this is good vanilla or this is bad vanilla. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, good vanilla grown without child labor, without deforestation, with decent incomes, with proper livelihoods, with good agricultural practices, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
bad vanilla with everything that was wrong with it. This farmer in Malagasy said to me, and it was translated from Malagasy into French and then French into English, no, Mr. Hamish, you are wrong. There is no such thing as bad vanilla. Being a Scot, I thought I'm going to have an interesting
Mm-hmm.
argument here in a moment. And he said, no, Mr. Hamish, you're wrong. There's no such thing as bad vanilla. There's only good vanilla. And I thought, okay, yeah, we're really going to have an interesting argument here.
Mhm.
And then with this translation of being told three times, Malagasy, French, English, he then landed the killer punch. And the killer punch was this: no, Mr. Hamish, you're wrong. There's no such thing as bad vanilla. There's only good vanilla and good and bad people. It's not the product that is sustainable or unsustainable. It's the people behaviors around the product, about the way it is produced, the way it is traded, the way it is sold. And that was the beautiful moment when I recognized the difference between education and intelligence. This farmer was not educated. He hadn't been to university, but he just educated me because he was willing to share his intelligence, his insight. It's not the product that's good or bad. It's the people behaviors around the product.
Wow.
And when you look at the challenges in any of our supply chains, and you and I met on Mint, and you can recognize exactly what I'm saying here. It's you get the people behaviors right, and the product will be sustainable. The trade will be sustainable. Every level of
Mhm.
the value chain will be reassured and appreciate
Mhm.
value, provided you focus on delivering the right people behaviors around the way the crop is grown, the way it's handled, the way it's treated, the way that families are supported, the way that communities look after the landscape, and the way that us as people on the far end of the supply chain treat people on the ground. And if we don't channel the right behaviors, we will never have sustainable anything. And I think for me that when we look at vanilla, the boom bust cycles of oversupply and now a lack of global demand, prices went as high as $550 a kilo, totally unsustainable level. Today, one of the leading producers of vanilla and exporters and importers of vanilla is importing vanilla to the United States at $27 a kilo.
No.
Totally unsustainable.
From over 500 at one
From
point.
over 500.
Wow. What a
Now, the market
fluctuation.
price is bouncing around about $50 for good quality vanilla at the moment. But when somebody is shipping in at $27 a kilo, you can rest assured that that is bad vanilla because the people behaviors there, I mean, that people are being exploited and taken advantage of.
Oh, absolutely. It's like when people see a t-shirt that is too good to be true because you're buying it for £3. A £3 t-shirt sold in the Western world is not going to have a happy past behind it. You can guarantee that absolutely. That really is fascinating, and I think the way that that's so clearly summed up by that farmer, there could be a lot of discussion and a lot of waffle around, what the focus is, but he just completely summed it up there, and I completely agree.
And you notice, Ben, that I'm not talking about brands, about one company or another company. I'm not talking about whether or not we've got heroes in the market and villains. No. What we need is for the market to function well, for the market to be guided by the governments in the countries responsible. And there are issues about interference in the vanilla market that some people would describe as neglect, other people would describe as incompetence, and others might even describe as corruption.
Hmm.
Now, those negative governance influences are present.
Yeah.
But you know what? When we look at the big companies in the world who are making a healthy living from this wonderful material,
Hmm.
they have got loud enough voices that if they raise those voices together and make those voices heard, we can see good governance in the countries of origin, and that can translate through to good, enjoyable indulgence for consumers around the world. Because the last thing that we want is for delicious tasting vanilla to leave a bitter taste in people's mouths because they are concerned about the conditions in which it's grown, about the terms and prices at which it's traded, and about who's getting rich while other people are staying ridiculously poor. Now, I say that without any hypocrisy, but fully cognizant of the fact that myself, I've made money from the vanilla business. I've been paid to build sustainable supply chains. I've been paid to help companies sort out their vanilla strategies and make things work. But I've always done it bearing in mind the farmer who told me that there's no such thing as bad vanilla, only good and bad people. The best one ever was when my son and I took vanilla ice cream from Manhattan all the way back to the Sava region of Madagascar to give people the first ever taste of ice cream they had.
I'm
And the big guys had been promising it for years. And they always came up with excuses to why they couldn't do it. Writing to KLM Air France and saying, can I take dry ice on board? Yes, you can, but only this much. Then getting the ice cream there and putting it in the hands of the kids of the vanilla farmers
yeah,
was one of my most enjoyable moments ever. And I want, and I hope through your podcast, we can re-excite people about the beauty of vanilla. We can remind the people who are in the vanilla business who might be listening to it that they've got a responsibility to look themselves in the mirror and say, are you doing the right thing? Or are you one of the chaos navigators who's exploiting the vanilla business for your own
mhm,
benefit at the cost of people and planet? Because if we don't tackle poverty, we will have deforestation. And if we don't tackle deforestation, we will have climate change. And if we've got climate change, we will have negative impacts on all crops, not just vanilla, but we're already starting to see the impact of climate change on those crops. So if I can, through your podcast, through your series, through people listening to me talking about how, yes, I have benefited from the vanilla business, but I have done my very best to make it a better place to do business in. And I think the more we can remind people the vanilla is a beautiful product. Enjoy it, share it with your family, moments of celebration, moments of joy, and remind the people who are selling you their brands with vanilla inside that they need to be doing the right thing by the farmers on the ground, because it's the farmers who will determine whether the environment and the planet and the biodiversity that we love and enjoy and need will continue to thrive by people collectively doing the right thing at every stage in the value chain.
Hamish, I think that is a beautiful place to finish. Thank you so much for this conversation. I have to say, working with you, as I have done previously, whether it's vanilla, which is a kind of new area for me, but on other areas that we've worked on, I've always loved the passion and the energy that you bring to everything that you do. And it has come across just as, if not even more strong today. Thank you so much for the conversation. I've learned a lot. I hope people that listen to this learn a lot and take away those, especially those final thoughts that you put in there so passionately, because, you know, every single supply chain, including vanilla, should be cherished, but needs to
Yes,
have a
yes,
sustainable,
yes,
resilient, and
yes.
positive future. So I thank you again, and yeah, I look forward to speaking again and hearing the feedback on our discussion today.
Well, thank you. As you can see, it's a pleasure. I've got a passion for vanilla, but really, I've got a passion for people. And it's the passion for people that translates across the supply chains. It's a passion for people that enables me to do my job. And it's the ability to connect with the people in the ground in Madagascar, in Uganda, in other parts of the world that are growing vanilla. That is a real privilege. And
Mhm.
so with a passion comes a genuine sense of responsibility. I hope I brought that across to your audience today. I encourage them to keep on holding people responsible for what they're putting in their mouths or putting in their bodies, right? But always appreciate the beauty of vanilla because it is so comforting, so special, and it is certainly not simple.
Absolutely not. I think we've definitely concluded that from today. And as always, with all of our podcasts, the aim is to reveal the truth, be very fact based. So, with all of our podcast series, we're going to do a small fact sheet to go with it with some really positive references to where if people want to find out more, they've made the first step today to get geeky on this supply chain. But if you want to find out more, then there will be references and notes from the podcast that I know that you've helped to work on where people can go and find out even more about this fantastic crop. But let's stop there and let me thank you again and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.